Okay, we're recording, Kathy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today is December 2nd, and this is the Finance Committee's meeting. And my first order of business will be to make sure that the committee members can hear and be heard because we're conducting this virtually. So I'll just call out names as I see them on the screen. Bob Hegner,
Present.
Kathy's here. Andy,
Here.
Counselor Haneke.
Present.
And I do not see Alicia yet or our two resident members. If they come in, I'll call on them when I see them, or people can bring it to my attention.
Yeah, Athena, just so you know, it says on my screen you were in a practice session.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Should I start the meeting again, Athena?
Yes, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today is December 2nd, and this is the a meeting of the Finance Committee. I will call out everybody's name just to make sure they can hear and we can hear them because we're conducting this virtually. Bob Hegner,
Present.
Kathy's here. Andy Steinberg,
Present.
Counselor Haneke,
Present.
Joe Jane,
Present.
and we're missing Alicia Walker and Tom Porter, and I will recognize them if they join us. We have a fairly straightforward agenda this morning. One is to look again at the guidelines for any changes we would like to make before we submit it as final and approved. I see Tom is joining us. Tom, Tom and Alicia. Tom, can you let us know if you can hear us and we
I
can
can
hear
hear
you?
you just fine. Thank you.
Alicia?
Hi, thank you, Kathy.
Great. Okay, so our agenda this morning is to review the guidelines for any changes we might want to make subsequent to the discussion last night at the council. And then I think we should officially vote to submit them as final or recommended guidelines so that we get it back to the council for their next meeting, which is next Monday night. The other two items are amazingly our hotshot finance department has managed to produce a first quarter report for this current fiscal year and an end of the year June 30th report for FY25. And I'll turn it over to Sean at that point to just point out any highlights on it. And he said we might be joined by our new comptroller, and he will be introducing her if we're joined. So the first thing on then the list is the budget guidelines. Bob pointed out one sentence that was missing from the guidelines that I covered in my summary last night, and Paul had provided me, there's a blank when it says when the UMass Strategic Partnership expires, and he gave me that. That's June 30th, 2027. So I will be putting that into that blank where it says to come. So, Bob, I see your hand is up, and anyone else who wants to make any comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to note on the first page from the third paragraph, it starts out, we note that projecting next year's revenues particularly risky due to uncertainty about state revenues. I would also add and health insurance costs because we talk about that later. On page 3, we say across all departments, we face increased labor costs, including a projected 15 to 20% increase in health insurance costs. What have we assumed in these guidelines? Sean, do you know?
We're assuming towards the higher end. I mean, we haven't done an operational expense projection yet. We've projected revenues in sort of high level categories, but based on what we're hearing, we would lean towards the higher side, 18 or 19%.
Okay, so we don't really have an assumption there.
Yeah, we don't have an official number. We won't have one for.
No, I know that. I know that. I just wondered what we assumed for, the projections.
Yeah.
And then on page 5, there's just a typo that you wouldn't catch in a spell checker. It's in the middle of the page. It says, note that savings assume that Wildwood would be closed or transferred to the town and thus not incur utility. It's coots in there, and it should be costs. coots are birds.
You
That's
got
why
it.
you,
Got it. Thank you.
yep. So otherwise, I think it's fine.
And Bob, last night you pointed out that although when I presented this, I said that the table is assuming that the 3.5% is on the elementary school base without this, and we don't
Right.
say that in the executive summary.
Right. We need to
We
say
do
that.
say, so it expense provide, I think that would go on page 1 or the top of page 2, provide
Right.
with, and exclude for now, the one-time funding from the elementary school base. And we discuss it later that we would consider bringing that back down on. So if that change is okay with people. I don't know whether I should be bringing this up on the screen or have someone bring it up on the screen, but he pointed that out, that the body of the text says that, but the executive summary doesn't say it. So I'll get reactions as we go through. So Mandy's
Okay.
hand, but Andy came before Mandy.
Yeah, following up on what Bob said about uncertainty of state funding made me think to ask a question as to whether there's any federal funding that we receive that has similar uncertainty to it. The only thing I could think of offhand was within the elementary school bud as part of the budget revenue there from anything. So, Sean, do you know of anything that might have us put federal as well as state in there?
Yeah, I think it's not, I think you should, because that does impact us. Title I, IDEA, Title III, Title IIA, the elementary schools get a lot of federal funding, and it's a relatively large portion of their budget. So if they're impacted negatively, it impacts the whole system. So I would definitely say include that. I also think CDBG will not part of our operating budget, has the potential to be impacted. And then Medicaid reimbursements, again, that's a schools generate it, but it comes into the overall revenue picture that we use to fund all of the operating budgets. That also could be impacted. So I think there's a variety of different exposures to federal funding cuts.
So I think that we would add that to the guidelines here. Where it says risky due to uncertainty about state revenues, federal revenues, and health insurance costs.
I agree.
Okay. I'm wondering, I can pull it up on my screen and be typing while I'm chairing, or maybe Mandy or someone else, just to make these. I'm taking notes on hard copies, so I will capture all of these. Mandy.
Yeah, so yeah, I wanted to say with respect to I agree with all the changes that Bob said. The general budget guidelines, expense projections, I think we can add it in there. On page 2, though, if you read things together, it does sort of imply that the 3.5% doesn't include it, because down on the 4th or 5th budget, the second bullet point of the indented bullet points says pending analysis increase the budget based nearer to its full amount. So read together, there's that implication. I just wanted to point that out, but I don't have a problem with adding something into the first bullet point to make it even clearer. As to federal funding, the other thing that I think Sonia at one point said to me was that the Medicaid funding also could potentially really affect our ambulance revenues, which might not affect next year's overall operating budget. But if Medicaid stops reimbursing as much as they do for ambulance runs, then the ambulance fund won't have as much to be able to fund the main operating budget. But presumably, the projections here are projecting something for ambulance revenues that are already in the ambulance fund,
Yeah.
not
No, that's
that
right.
would be coming in.
Yep.
So And
So
I can
any-
pull this up as I type if people want me
that'd be
to,
great, because
but
I
I'm
just
working
tried
on
to,
typing.
yeah, because I just went to pull it up in it may be my computer, but my page is frozen. I can't pull it up. I can see you all, so that's fine. I'm good for now. It's better than on the iPad, which was last week's thing. So we're adding those phrases, and we'll change the dates. It's December 2nd up at top. So federal funding and health insurance costs and a date. Otherwise, for Joe and Tom, who probably didn't stay up to listen to us last night, but there were a lot of questions. There was some clarifying, what is the Special Education Stabilization Fund? How does it work? Do you draw on it only in the case something unusual has happened? So we clarified what that was, and could there be one? And the answer is yes for the regional schools, and there is one, but it's more complicated. And then the other question we got was about fire EMS, on questioning whether the 2017 study is what we should base conclusions on. And I said that the town is doing a review of that. So the way we've written it right now is pending review. So the one other thing I didn't emphasize last night, but right now the table that we were given shows a deficit. And so some of these changes that we've made will potentially add to that deficit when the town manager and the finance director look at this, in terms of doing expense budget for the departments that's at the actual level. When they look at it, that leeway of going to 10% for capital may be necessary to get to a balanced budget. So, it may not just be freeing up money for operating budgets to increase the 3.5%. So we did get some questions last night on Sean's level of confidence on 3.5, looking at revenues. So, Sean, I stated that at the point we talked to you, you were fairly confident of that, although noting the risks.
Yeah, there's definitely some areas for risk this year more than others, because of some of the things that we talked about with state aid and federal aid. If those, again, we haven't built in any increase in state aid in a normal year. We, would likely get a 2 or 3% increase in state aid that would help us address some of the things that are in the guidelines. I haven't heard definitively that that's not going to happen, but I think it's, again, the risk that it's lower than typical is greater this year. So nothing that would make me change, or that I would ask Paul to change the number at this point. But I think this group seems aware of those risks, so I think that's just the main point, is that we all are aware that they could change, and if they do, we'll report to this committee as soon as we can.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, hi, Sean. I know from our last meeting you were talking a little bit about the money that we had allocated for the elementary school special education stabilization fund, which I think you were mentioning it has around $250,000 in it. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. So when we appropriate free cash to elementary school fund, I think you also implied that money really hasn't been used. Has it? Like, have we appropriated any of that money in the past few years for its purpose, or has it just kind of been sitting there?
So when I looked at the elementary fund, I can't see that it's been used. And I think the way the guidelines are written, I think they were edited last meeting so it's more about replenish what's in there if it is used, not to necessarily increase it beyond where it's at, but to replenish it if there is an unanticipated out of district placement or something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That was kind of you answered my question. Thank you.
And Sean, one question we got last night is, how was this originally set up? In the year that it was set up, did we appropriate extra money for the elementary school to make it part of their budget? So the question was just, where did the original 244,000 come from, aside from interest costs? Yeah.
I think so. I set it up, and I think at the time I had to go to select board and town meeting, because it was before we switched form of government. And they've made contributions to it after that. So I think it was initially like 150,000 and there's been small additions to it. I can go back and look. I don't remember if there was a year where the operating budget came in under and we asked to move the savings basically into that fund. So let me do some digging because it was, about 10 years ago. But
And this was
yeah.
just a question of the history of how it initially got funded. And
Yeah.
so we can report that back if you have that information. And
Yep.
some of it will be interest if it's been sitting there not being used. But
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I vaguely remember looking at a town meeting warrant and it was a warrant article to move money into it. But let me see if I can find a report or something that says where that money came from or if it was just from free cash at that time.
thank you. Bob,
Yeah, Mandy, I just wanted to say that the thing you added to the base, there's a typo in there. It should be saying not including.
Thank you.
No problem. It's, those are things, spell
that's
check
that's
doesn't
like
count.
that's a Kathy form of typo, the ones that are really hard to find. So are there
It's
any
something that
other
spell
comments,
checker won't catch.
any other comments or changes?
I couldn't remember. Bob, you said something about you had us look at page 3, but you didn't ask for any changes on page 3, right? With the
Yeah, I
healthcare
was just
costs.
asking what we had assumed.
Okay.
That's all. Which,
Okay.
you
Yeah,
got the.
so to the extent health insurance comes in lower, the deficit will be less, is what I think I heard, that Sean put on the high end,
Well,
we'll
no,
be,
I don't think the deficit will be left. Those health insurance costs would be within the operating numbers. It would just free up for, it would make
it would be free up, it would be free up within that, right? And we
within
don't,
that, it wouldn't change the deficit.
and we don't have pension yet, right, Sean? I mean, we have what we thought it was going to be, but we don't have the official on pension.
We have it. Yeah. So we'll update our numbers with that. We've got when we get our number, we have to break it down between the enterprise funds and the schools. So we've got to do that piece of it, but we have the number.
Okay.
I'll double check, but I believe it was lower than what we have budgeted. So that'll help a little bit.
Okay. So to the extent there are any changes you want to make to the table, Sean, I just copied in, I photoshopped it in. These were the revised numbers you gave us in those two tables. So if
Yep.
those are, it still says for discussion only. That was the one you did on November 12th. So if there are any changes, I'll send you this if you want to replace those tables. Otherwise, these are the tables people have
Okay.
seen. I mean,
Okay.
these are literally what you gave us. So
Yeah. And I think we talked about maybe coming back in January or February with an
Yeah.
updated one anyway, which would capture state aid and anything else that's changed.
Yeah. Can I ask one question that doesn't relate to the budget guidelines, but relates to questions last night? Sorry for all the scrolling. I'll stop scrolling. There were questions not just about the elementary stabilization fund, but about the region stabilization fund, which we tried to answer with that it exists. We don't think it's been used, but it's harder to use because of 4 towns and a regional school. Do you know, though, if it's ever been used or what its amount is?
The region?
Yeah.
No, but Shannon can get us, it's an easy number to grab, so I can get that from Shannon. And it's a little more challenging, but they don't have to do a town meeting or anything like that to use. I think it was the select boards that they have to meet with in order to access it for the region. So they meet monthly. It's not as big of a lift in order to use the money that they have in the fund.
Okay, thanks.
And then I did find on our website, so it looks like it was 2017 was when the elementary schools formed it. And it was $150,000 was a one-time transfer from free cash, and the transfer was offset by funds returned to the town of Amherst from the elementary school operating budget. So we must have had a year where we finished with some funds, and we asked basically to take an equivalent amount from free cash to put into the special ed stabilization fund. And then they have made additional contributions to it since then, because it's up to 240,000, I believe.
Okay. Have we drawn on that at all? Like,
Not, I could double check right now, but
huh.
I don't believe so. And if that's not right, I'll correct myself in a second.
So to the extent that was a question, we might expand that footnote, Mandy, that this was set up in 2017 with a transfer from free cash based on a surplus in the elementary school or whatever Sean quickly rattled off, but that's when it was set up.
And this stabilization fund is for any purpose, right? It's not just special needs students. This can be
No,
used.
it's
No, this
special.
one's, yeah.
It is special. Okay.
Special education. It's meant, it's underneath, Joe, the citation in it, the hot link brings you
Okay.
back to a special education stabilization fund. And
Okay, thank you.
it's within circuit breakers. So it's the notion
Okay.
that you get hit with a very high cost student that you didn't anticipate on September 1. You know,
Right.
they arrive at your school and you haven't budgeted for them.
Gotcha.
And it's high enough that your normal flexibility can't absorb it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So are there any other changes while Mandy is scribing here? That I think that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to note that based on the conversation last night, I think it's important that we just point out that all the money that's in that fund is Amherst money. It's not state money. It's not any other money. That I think that's what people were asking.
Okay.
Was it
Okay.
did it just come from Amherst or did it come from the state or whatever? So.
And just to be clear, we're talking about two different funds. When we talk about the elementary school special education stabilization fund with that balance of around 250,000, and then another fund that we were just talking about, that's for the whole district for the 4 schools. These are 2 separate funds, right? 2 separate
Correct.
buckets.
Yeah.
But
Correct.
they go for the same purpose. Is that accurate? They both go for special education, correct?
Yeah, one's for K through 6, essentially, and the other one is 7 through 12.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and the other question that was asked last night was the special education at the region, special education stabilization fund at the region is not the same as E&D. It's
Nope, it's
separate
different.
from E&D. Yeah.
Yep, no, completely separate. Yep. So they have at the region they have E&D, which is equivalent to our free cash. They have a general stabilization fund, which is similar to our general stabilization fund. Theirs is more for capital. Sorry, I should say it's a capital stabilization fund. And then they have the special ed reserve fund, which I don't know how much money is in it.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what's E&D?
Excess and deficiency. So
Okay.
regional school districts across the state are allowed basically to retain a little bit of the money that's left over in their budget, similar to our free cash.
Gotcha.
But it's capped at 5%. So if they ever have more than 5% of their operating budget in E&D, they have to give it back to the member towns.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
And Joe, just so you know, nothing in our guidelines talks about the region section. This had
I
come
understand.
up during discussions for the elementary school district because this year they were hit. They did experience a family moving in mid-September with some high need kids, and so
Okay.
the question came up of, is there a fund like this? And the answer was yes.
Right, and so was that used? Have
No,
we
it hasn't
used
been,
any of that
it
capital?
hasn't been used. But this
Was there
year,
a reason it wasn't used? I'm just kind of curious. If the family was moved in and that's the purpose of that money.
There's
Why
even
wasn't-
another fund, just so
Oh,
kind of round
okay.
out the conversation. There's even
Okay.
another fund called Circuit Breaker,
Okay.
which you've probably heard of.
Yep.
Circuit Breaker, it's a little bit, there's sort of a best practice way of using it, but there's also a way to use it if you're having an emergency situation. So when you have really high need special education students in terms of their cost, the state
Mhm.
does reimburse a percentage over a certain level, around 50 grand. So if you have an out-of-district replacement and it costs 200 grand, they will reimburse you for a large portion. So the elementary schools get somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000 a year of reimbursement from the state. That
Okay.
goes into a revolving fund. And then our practice has always been you're allowed to carry those funds over for 1 year, but you have to use it the following year. And for budgeting purposes, we've always, whatever we get this year, we don't use it in the year we receive it. We use it the following year so that we
Oh,
know,
okay.
so we know exactly how much we have, because you don't really know exactly what you're going to get until the very end of the year.
Okay, of course.
But in a pinch, you could use that money in the year you receive it. But again, that would only be if you had a real big emergency, and we have other options. But that's another fund that can be used long term to cover special education costs. It wouldn't necessarily help you in the first year because you don't get the reimbursement for it until the following year.
Okay.
It's like a 3 year. You incur the costs, you get reimbursed the following year, and then we use it the year after that. So it's like a 3 year cycle. But we do get reimbursement for some of those costs as well.
Okay. Sean, that's so helpful. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for these.
And that's a
That's
state
okay.
questions.
that's a state reimbursement.
No, because I have a question about circuit breaker that you prompted. Sean, are all circuit breaker kids out of district or some taken care of in the school?
So circuit breaker, it's based on the cost of the students. And so
Right.
there's a report that the schools do every year. And so they don't have to be out of district placement
Okay.
students. If you have an in-district program and some students have one-to-one aid with them and they might need special
Okay.
transportation to get to school, those costs add up quickly and they could be eligible as well.
And just so people know, it's if you look at the circuit breaker for elementary or regional, both of them have 13 kids the last time I looked, and those costs are averaging 100,000 per kid. However, some might be really high and some might be lower. So as Sean said, there's a threshold when the state kicks in. So that's the counting, is that they're all above 50, but
Yeah.
some are a lot higher. So
And that 100,000, when you say what amount of time is that covers them for
1 year.
just 1 year?
So
Okay.
there's a report that is generated on circuit breaker on the total amount spent that was eligible that the state looks at, and
Yep.
for how many students. And my simple math was to divide the total by the number of the count, and then way over at the side it shows you what the state reimbursement is as
I
a
gotcha.
share of that. So it's not the net cost to the schools, but that's the
Okay.
total cost. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much.
one of the points of advocacy that is always good for the finance committee and the council is to always ask the state to increase. The state varies in its reimbursement rates of circuit breaker. And so they've had years where it's been lower than others. They did a good job this past year, kind of backfilling it with savings they had at the end of the year from the prior year. But that's just for advocacy. If you're ever thinking about that's a good area because they don't fund 100% of the cost above that threshold. The max is 75% that they cover. And then transportation, which is a big cost. Sometimes transportation, they cover even less than the 75%. And so that's an
Right.
area where we always say, get to that 75% for transportation.
Gotcha. I appreciate that, Sean. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And Kathy, thank you. Those numbers are very helpful to know. Appreciate your sharing that.
Well, when you look at them, and there's one of the bills that's sitting there in the legislature was to increase the state share above the threshold to 90% and lower the threshold. And that alone is $1 million plus to each of our two school systems. I mean, these are just big dollars, is the point about these extraordinarily high need children that are either taken care of within the school itself or in a specialized location. So anyone who's interested, I can just send a link to the circuit breaker reports from the state. They're simple. It's just a number, on.
Well, I guess that makes sense, right? It makes sense that we have all this. We're trying to set aside all this money, right, in these different buckets because it is expensive.
Yeah.
If this happens. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the question, the answers. Thanks.
So if there are no other comments on the report, I believe we should officially vote that this is our final version of the report, and that we're recommending these guidelines to the council to be adopted. And I'm not as good as Mandy at forming a motion, but I'm willing to make the motion. I make a motion that the finance committee recommends the guidelines as revised by the committee on December 2nd, recommends to the council that they adopt these guidelines.
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion? then I will put it to vote. Mandy, if you can stop screen sharing, then I'll be able to
Sure.
more easily see everybody. So I'm going to go around the screen as I see people. Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Kathy is a yes. Andy,
Yes.
Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Joe Jane,
Aye.
and Tom Porter,
Aye.
Alicia.
Yes.
So it is unanimous with all committee members present. Thank you all for getting up early and attending the Tuesday Finance Committee meeting. So I'm now turning it over to Sean for the quarterly report and the end of the year quarterly report FY26 and the end of the year report for FY25. And as I think Joe and Tom, you both know, our year ends on June 30th.
Mhm.
So this is the closing report. And Sean, you can do these in either order.
Okay. Would it be helpful if I share my screen as I go through it?
Yes, that'd be
that would
awesome. Thank you.
All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Large enough? All
Or
right.
at least I can see it.
Yep.
So I'll do the FY25 one first. So this would be the final report for the year. So this would sort of recap the activity for FY25. And so I'm not going to go through everything, but if there's questions on anything you see, let me know. On the revenue side, in total, we collected about 5.4% over target. Sort of our overall revenue estimates, we collected 5.4% higher. Some of the key areas where revenue came in higher, investment income, we've talked about that one. So investment income was about $2 million. We'll look at it down below in the table, but investment income came in much higher. Again, this is related to interest rates being much higher than they have been historically, and us having additional funding on hand from some of these construction projects, from the loans that we have, and some of those projects having delays. So we had more money on hand for longer than we might have anticipated when we built the budget. And some of these areas too, I've noted if we came in high, I've noted if we have adjusted that budget for FY26. So for example, investment income for FY25, we brought in more than we estimated, but that budget was increased for FY26. So we've reflected that in the FY26 budget. And then we've also reflected that in the FY27 budget, an increase even beyond that. So for investment income, that budget has been moved upwards to be closer to what we've been receiving. But again, that's the one I caution the most is investment income because of just the volatility that there is around that and how quickly it could drop. All this, just so everyone knows, most of this revenue comes from either money market accounts that are paying 3 or 4% right now, and the interest rates could change in a month, or they come from 1-year CDs, again, where the interest rates could change from 1 year to the next. They're not, the rates aren't protected beyond that.
And Sean, so the investment, is this money sitting in like free cash or stabilization funds, or is it a combination of kind of everything?
Combination of everything.
Okay.
So unless certain funds have a restriction, then it would be general fund interest. So for example, stabilization funds do have a restriction. So the interest for stabilization funds stay within the stabilization fund, but free cash would be part of this. All of our, revolving funds, different things like that, any interest they earn generally would be part of this. But some funds, trust funds, things like that, you have to actually keep the interest in the fund that it's in.
Okay.
Sure. Do you want to take questions as we go along, or
Yeah,
do you want to?
that's fine to me. It's probably easier to take them as we go, so while they're fresh,
Okay.
unless you want to wait till the end.
So the question I have on this is what we heard last year, Joe, was that some of what is accruing interest or we've ordered and booked the money to buy an ambulance, but it won't be delivered for 5 years. So it's sitting there. It's been appropriated. So
Right.
Sean, we had asked how much is in. I don't know what even to call this account because it's
not one account. It's all of them. Again, it's all of the town's
All
holdings,
combined.
which is, as you can imagine, is quite a bit from all the different sources, all the schools, again, all the schools revolving funds that they have. all of that generates interest. And again, even historically, money markets, which are, just kind of regular checking accounts, paid very little interest, but even those accounts now are paying 3 or 4% interest.
Right. So those are on par probably with just like CD rates too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, they're not that far off from
they're
CD
not that
rates.
far off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's short term.
And it was also unusually high for things like we moved 5 million out of a capital reserve fund into a purchase offsetting costs for the elementary school, and then we didn't use it right away. We've used up some of that, but it was we've used up probably all of it at this point. But it was sitting there earning interest in this cash
Yeah,
account.
no, that's a good example because when it was in the capital stabilization fund, the interest would have stayed within the capital stabilization fund, but once it was appropriated for a project, then it comes out of that capital stabilization fund. So that's a good example, Kathy, of how the interest, the interest is the interest, but where it lives changes based on kind of what form the money is in, if it's an appropriation versus just in the stabilization funds or free cash.
What about monies that like if we issue debt? Like if we issue debt, is that money appropriated immediately, or does that sit in cash?
So when we actually, it's not necessarily like the authorization of the debt, but when we actually go and get a ban and we
Yeah.
receive the money,
Yep.
it depends. There's, it's never perfect timing. It's always, sometimes we do the bans, you always have to have the authorization in place, but sometimes costs start to get incurred before we get the ban because we're
Okay.
timing it for when we have other bans coming due.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do the bans in advance of the project.
Okay.
So if you've already incurred the cost, then you're not really earning any additional interest because you've
Right.
already paid the money and you're just kind of
Got it.
reimbursing yourself. And you have to do that within the fiscal year. But if, for some of the projects like the school projects, there was
Yeah.
some bonds taken out because they, the decision was made that it was advantageous to get some money locked in and start paying down the debt. So there was some, we're paying on those, we have that money from those bonds, but we haven't incurred all of those expenses yet. So that's
Right.
an example where that's generating interest and we haven't fully spent it. And so that's helping. That's what I mean by the timing of some of these construction projects, where that's helped increase this number as well.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you, Sean.
The other area that was higher, and we talked about this too, is licenses and permits. So that finished about 68% over budget, primarily because of two areas: building permits and the rental registration system. The rental registration system is one of those ones where we're working with the inspections department. That could be something that changes a little bit for the next round of projections. Again, it's a new. Yeah, my understanding is they kind of really got off the ground last year, and there was some weird timing with how, not weird timing, but just some timing issues with the first year. And so figuring out what the ongoing revenue is from the new program is something that might change the numbers for the next time we look at the FY27 projections. But the building permits, again, this is all timing and development. So if there's a lot of projects coming due or getting started, then we could bring in higher building permit revenue. If there's a year where there's not a lot of projects getting started, then this number could be lower. One project can generate a really significant amount of building permit revenue. So again, this is a volatile area. We did increase it for the FY26 budget, and we have increased it a little bit more for FY27. But I just want to caution, this is again one of those very elastic type of revenues where it can expand and contract very quickly based on what's going on.
So we don't really see a trend line on this. We haven't, over the last 10 years.
It's been up.
Kind of up and to the right, or not really?
No, I would say it's been up, and that's
Yeah,
why
okay.
we are increasing the budget.
Yeah.
But we're not increasing it so far that if there is a down year, that it would put us in a bad spot, is what I'd say. So there is a trend that it is up. There's been more development for sure.
Yeah.
But so we have increased the budgets to reflect that.
And the noise and the violation one, that was up. Is that normal, or is that just kind of
that was a little bit
one-off?
That was a little bit different. So I think I'd have to talk with the chief on that one to understand if there was something something unusual about why that came in so much higher, because that was up a little bit from prior years. Again, that's not big. It's a big percentage. It's not big dollars in terms of the component of the budget, but that was an interesting one.
So the investment income makes up the biggest percentage of
investment income, and licenses and permits are the two biggest pieces.
Big ones.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Thank you, Sean.
A couple other areas. Again, some of the increase too are revenues that are earmarked for other things. So, for example, in miscellaneous recurring, it's over budget, but it includes opioid settlement money that is really earmarked. Once it goes into free cash, we transfer it into our opioid mitigation revolving fund. So it makes the kind of delta look a little bigger than it really is because we don't budget those funds. We collect them and then they get transferred into this revolving fund. I think in the future we can deposit them directly into the revolving fund so they don't even impact the general fund, but I don't think we had that fund set in place before this year and these monies were collected. So a portion of the surplus there is related to some of these funds that get transferred elsewhere. Same thing with like the cannabis excise tax. We transfer that into the reparation stabilization fund. We don't even budget it. We just collect it. So it shows up on the revenue received side, but it's not on our budget side because we don't use it for the operating budget. Motor vehicle excise tax came in higher. We've talked about that. We increased our FY26 budget and we increased the FY27 budget to reflect, a trend in that revenue being higher, especially vehicle prices going up and the impact that has on the excise tax. Another one that's really unique and had generated pretty significant revenue for this year, but again, it's not something we're going to get every year, is bond premiums. So sometimes you get a bond premium when we go out for like the school bonds to fund the school project. Banks will offer above what you're asking. It's a way to kind of influence the interest rate. If they give you more and the interest rate's higher, it kind of offsets the higher interest rate. But it comes in as a general fund revenue. We don't budget for it.
Oh, wow. So those aren't just issued at like par value.
No, most bonds, almost all bonds we get are either, depending on the market, either at a premium or a discount. And it, again, we adjust the effective interest rate. It reflects the premiums that you get, but it comes in as a general fund revenue.
So that's just attributed to just demand, probably? Like there's just a good demand in the market and people will pay up.
I think it's what bond rates are and how the bond market is, whether they're doing premiums or discounts. I think bonds right now are, well, I'm not a bond economist. I'm not going to attest to that. But,
I think it's good to know. Yeah. So sometimes when those are issued, recently, right, we've gotten a premium on those, so we take it.
Yeah, and we don't do bonds all that often. That's the other thing. Yeah. So we had a big bond premium because we've done some large bonds for the elementary school. Yeah. Most of the time we're doing smaller bonds, $1 million or so, but we did, $26 million of bonds over 2 years. So this reflects 1 year, which is about 12 or 13 million, and then in FY24, the year before, we had another large bond for the elementary school. So we don't do bonds that size very often. So it's just kind of a unique thing that's impacting this year.
Cool.
So that's on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we finished about 5.1% under budget. The vast majority of that is the ARPA money. So we allocated ARPA against our health insurance account. So if you look at the employee benefits bullet, the third bullet here, that finished under budget by 3.8 million because we basically put that towards benefits so that money could flow into free cash. And some of that's already been spent on like the Bang Center where there was a large appropriation out of free cash that was kind of from this money. It just hadn't hit free cash yet. So if you ignore the ARPA adjustment, it actually was very tight on the expenditure side, relatively tight, much tighter than prior years. But that's a unique thing that happened in FY25. Mandy Jo?
Yeah, with that tightness, I appreciated you pulling out the ARPA and saying, and here's where we'd be if that wasn't there. Which was like 99 point something percent of our budgeted expenses, right? And so it's tighter than in previous years. Do we know, we get just a general, HR was 102 to pick one out, or the town council was 94, but we don't get it split out between personnel and just other expenses. So people and stuff. And we've heard that the stuff side of it, the expense side of it is overspending. Are we sort of at the point where we're seeing this, that because the expense numbers have been held steady, they are now basically taking up all of the, or nearly all of the vacancy personnel that we'd normally see in the underutilization of the expense budget, such that in FY26 we might be even worse off on the expense side and maybe completely going over what we budgeted for expenses.
Yeah, I mean, so they can't go over what they budgeted for expenses without us reviewing it and approving it, right? We don't, we monitor department spending, and if they go over their budget, we freeze them, and they have to tell us where the funds are coming from. So they can't. I know that's been thrown out that they use personnel, but it's a deliberate process that we talk about with departments. They can't just do it. I'll have to look at that, Mandy Jo. I can run a report on my side and look kind of at this and look at those spending percentages relative to the original budget, split out by personnel and operating expenses. I don't want to kind of guess on my side. I think what you're saying is right, that we've heard vacancy savings is being used to cover some of the operating expenses and allow them to go over. But I want to run that report and kind of verify it first.
No, that would be great. And just I'm just thinking to the FY26 year end, which we're only a quarter of the way through, right? But
Yep.
if we saw this tight of the expense side, are we expecting at least that tight, if not even tighter on the expense side for FY26?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm expecting the expense side of the budget to be very tight, especially because we have new collective bargaining agreements going into place for FY26. Some of them aren't even settled yet, so we don't know exactly what the costs are yet because they haven't been settled. We know what we budgeted, but until they're settled, we don't. There's a retro payment typically. We have to adjust the salaries and things like that. So we'll talk about that in the next report. The one meaning in a few minutes. But yes, I anticipate the expense side for FY26 to be very tight. Tom?
Hi, Sean. Thank you for that. I just want to ask two things. We say in our own guidance that we want to strive to be, more precise and tighter on our projections and to square those up afterwards. So it doesn't trouble me so much that we were within 1%, but you're right to point out that that's really a hair's breadth. On the issue of um, the vacancies, I guess maybe this has been answered, but I'm just not 100% clear on it. For the sake of planning 2027, is there a default assumption that existing vacancies will be budgeted as though they are filled or to be filled? Or is the default, or is it a position by position negotiation during budgeting?
I would say this year could be different because we anticipate it's going to be a challenging budget year because of health insurance. In past years, typically if there's vacancies, those vacancies are carried over to the next year, and the departments can fill them, or they're actively working to fill them as we're developing the budget. The exception being this past year, there were some vacancies that were frozen, meaning the funding was pulled out of the budget. That's not all vacancies. That was some vacancies. So those vacancies would not be rolled over to next year. We would keep them identified as positions that don't have funding currently. But the default wouldn't be to necessarily fund those unless there's resources to do that. If we have the resources to do it, the town manager, I'm sure, is going to consider that. But setting aside those frozen vacancies, other vacancies, the typical practice would be to carry those forward into the next year, and departments could fill them. The caveat being, anticipate this will be a challenging budget year with health insurance. So no final decisions have been made around that, but I understand the question about, can departments just go ahead and fill those vacancies? Right now they can. The vacancies they have that are funded, they can fill.
All right, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, and then the other thing on the expense side, I'll just point out the other area that contributed is debt payments. So, I'm going to really focus on this a lot in the next year and the coming years around these construction projects. We budgeted for some debt payments that ultimately didn't need to be made because the projects were delayed. And so that added, if you go down the debt section, that added a decent chunk to the savings as well. So there's a trade-off. You can budget the debt payments early, and if you don't make them, then that money's available, but you might have been able to use it for something else. If you wait until the project is completely done and bonded and then budget the debt payments, you'll have more certainty around the timing of the debt payments, but it's likely you'll have to carry more short-term debt and pay more short-term interest basically to get to the end of the project. So there's a little bit of a trade-off, and I'm just raising this as something that we're going to look at because we got these building projects and the timing of the debt. And we don't want to necessarily have budget debt payments that we're not going to make. Now, some of the debt payments that were budgeted that were made, it was used to pay off some other obligations, which was great. So there were some things that were paid off. So we don't have to carry that debt anymore. So that was good, but we still had some savings from this area. But so that's not those two, the debt service and the ARPA adjustment, they're not really operational areas. That's why I kind of pulled those out to show you what the operational side looked like. Joe, did you have a question?
I'm just kind of thinking, excuse me, because so, and these are kind of one-offs, right? ARPA, we don't expect to get that next year,
No,
right?
that will never happen again.
That's
Well,
never, okay.
Hopefully that will never happen again. I mean, it's nice having the money, but
Sean, you're the best. And then the debt service, really, that also goes back to we weren't really spending that money, so we were also earning a little bit more interest on it. So maybe that was part of the reason we had more.
Yeah, well, this is more we didn't.
Maybe. Am I thinking about that right?
This one's more we didn't have to take out the borrowing because the project wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the elementary school was a little bit delayed, and the payments came in a little bit lower. The library project was delayed a little bit,
Right.
and payments came in lower. I think even the ladder truck, sorry, I listed them here. So the track and field, we didn't have to make payments on the pumper truck, the pumper truck and the ladder truck. Some of that's just it's taking so long now to get those. We thought we were going to have them in time to make the payment, and we didn't. So
awesome. Thank you, Sean.
Yep. So then enterprise funds. So enterprise funds did pretty well overall. For sewer and water, the revenues finished about 4.5% over estimates, or 4.2 and 4.5 respectively over estimates on the revenue side. And on the expense side, the sewer budget was about 98.6% spent, and the water budget was 97% spent. So they both did okay. I know there was a mid-year appropriation to kind of shore up the sewer fund, so this reflects that additional revenue as well. Solid waste. Oh, Bob?
Yeah, I just had a question about the solid waste fund.
Yeah.
You say that rental revenue from the cell tower and the solar array came in over budget. Does that vary from year to year?
There was a timing issue in FY25. It looked like there was something to do with getting revenue from the solar array and the rent, some of the payments they owed us. And so one of the things in this account, there was like a prior year related to some of the solar revenues, I believe. And so typically we'll know pretty well what those will be, especially the solar revenue. We'll know exactly what the solar revenue will be going forward. The rental, the cell tower revenue can vary a little bit because we get a percentage of the revenue they make. So they pay us like a flat fee, and then there's a percentage of whatever they make. So that can vary a little bit. But FY25 was a little bit of a unique year where there was some prior year money that came in as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then the transportation fund finished 4.6% over budget, and the expenditure side finished 5.4% under, mainly because they had a position that wasn't filled. And then here's all of your detailed tables. Any other questions on the FY25 report? The overall figure was about, what was it, about 10? It was 5.5.
10.8.
10.8 between the revenue and the expense side. Yeah. Thank you,
Kathy, do we have a copy of this? Did you send us a copy of this? I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah, it's in the packet.
I did
Okay.
send it to you. I forwarded it last week and it's in the
Okay.
packet. So I don't know
Perfect.
whether you and Tom know, you can always look in the packet for today if you
Yep.
go on the town website. So you have it in two places as a PDF. So I just have an observation and then a question. Sean. So the golf course, the Cherry Hill Golf Course.
Mhm.
There has been a committee that's been set up to look at it. And this year, it looks like it's generated a surplus. If I look at the revenue line minus the expense line, and I know that it doesn't include fringes, but my understanding is that, in terms of the health insurance or pension, but there's only about 1.5 people working for that get benefits. So I'm not sure what the exact number is.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming or hoping that this is shared right away with that committee, because I'm not sure why the committee was set up, but the public perception, because of some articles that appeared several years ago, is that it's a major money loser. And that hasn't been true for the last couple of years. I'm not saying it's a money maker, but that was just an observation on the golf course. Then mine was more of a question is, I know you haven't done certified free cash yet, the final closing out of the year. In the past, how much has this end of the year quarter, how closely has it tracked with the certification? Is it usually pretty close? Or does the state come in and say, do some rearrangement? I'm just doing is it almost the same kind of question? So the first is just an observation on golf course to make sure the committee gets these.
Mhm.
And the second is a question on this end of the year, since the guidelines talk about some of this once it's certified, what we're looking at. And I know part of that extra has to go into replenishing free cash because we pulled it down. So some of it disappears just to bring free cash back up to the 5 million.
Right.
And Tom and Joe, we run about 5 million in free cash. I'm not being exact, and we use some of that. So bringing that back up to that 5%, that the target, and our stabilization fund, the general one, has been at where we need to be. So the free cash, then we can be looking at it, not necessarily going into those. So the question is just how close is it usually?
Yeah, it should be pretty close. There are some adjustments that get made as part of the free cash process. If we have any deficit funds, which we shouldn't really have any deficit funds that I've seen. There's only one fund that I'm looking at, and it was the Centennial Centennial Water Treatment Facility project. That capital fund, there was a time we got like our first loan and then we got our second loan. I believe that's one of the deficits that's forgiven. There's certain deficits that the state forgives and doesn't hit your free cash. So that's the only one I'm unsure about. But generally it would be pretty close, but there are some little adjustments. My guess would be it'd be a little bit less than the 10.8, but not hugely less, if that makes sense. Hugely.
So I see Andy, Bob, and then Tom. Andy?
Yeah, follow up on what you just said, Sean, with the Centennial. Wouldn't that affect the excess funds in the enterprise fund and not the general fund?
That's a good question. I don't know. Potentially. Yeah, it might come out of the water retained earnings before it would hit free cash. Until I go through, I haven't, so typically this free cash certification process has always been done by the comptroller. So it's a good experience, but this was my first time going through it. So
Yeah, I realize that this is a time when we miss Sonia and Holly a lot.
I know I text her at least a couple times a week. So
Um, the is there any indication of when the free cash will be certified, or is that a mystery?
So we are working through all the reports. I'd say our goal is to have everything submitted by the end of the month that needs to be submitted. Then it goes through a process with the state that it has to be certified. And there's a little bit of back and forth, but our goal is by the end of this month to have everything submitted. And in order to submit, you have to close the fiscal year. So we've got to make sure everything is done in our last fiscal year completely, any adjustments that have to be made, and then close it before we can submit. So there's still a decent amount of work to do, but we've started it and we're we've updated a lot of our forms and all the stuff that needs to be done. But I would say end of the month.
Okay. Just so that everybody in the committee is aware of the whole process, usually we get that in substantially early. Our goal has always been to try and get all of that information in, because the way that uh, DOR works it, they sort of do it in order that they receive them. And so the sooner you get it in, the sooner you
Yeah.
get it back. And that's why this year, with the changeover in the comptroller position, we are probably behind, which is why the question came up last night at the council meeting about why we didn't, why we aren't doing free cash transfers now. They usually would have been done in November. Um, so I don't know. I just bringing that to the attention of the committee, because I don't know if we want to say anything about it in our report and make some preliminary recommendations about free cash transfers. Otherwise, it's going to be left to the new council, and they're not going to have the experience that the old council has in dealing with free cash issues. And the other thing that I noted is that the cannabis tax is about $56,000 for the year. And we're going to get into the question that comes up each year about how much to transfer to that stabilization fund, because is it going to really meet the goals? And you can imagine what the arguments are. So I don't know if this is something the committee ought to be talking about, but I wanted to at least alert to the issue.
Andy, our guidelines, just as a reminder, our guidelines do talk about it under budget surpluses. We talk about both those funds and make some recommendations. So it is in the current guidelines.
And
Thanks
it's
for the
in the
reminder.
guidelines we passed for last year that would cover this fall's thing.
Right. So I agree, but we have been mentioning it. Bob and then Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to add a comment that we need to, first of all, I think the fact that we have like a $10 million surplus is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but it's going to be a difficult thing to communicate to the public. So we need to really think, and I think, echoing what Andy said, maybe we need to be a little stronger in terms of where we think this money should go, and how we're going to use it, because I think otherwise the public is going to say, well, we need it all for the schools, or we need it all for this, we need it all for that. We need to be thoughtful about, some of it we have to give back to free cash. I understand, but I mean, people are just going to look at the number, a $10 million surplus, and it's going to be hard to communicate what that really means.
Tom.
I concur with Bob. They may say any one of those things, or they may just say, lower my taxes. So I think it's good that we're recommending not to charge into an override, for instance. I just wanted to quickly say thank you, Sean, for such a clear and careful presentation. And I apologize. I have to depart early because I'm doing a board meeting that started a couple of minutes ago, but this has been fruitful, and I look forward to reading the Q1 report that you're about to charge into. Thank you all.
Mandy and Sean, or Sean, do you want to respond to Bob, or whichever?
Mandy can go first. That's fine.
Oh, I was just gonna say it might be a 10.4 million surplus for FY25, but the free cash transfers we'll see after free cash is certified won't be 10.4 million at all, because the first 2.8 is, as Bob said, is going to have to replenish the free cash up to 5%, our guidelines, because we used 2.8 million of it preemptively, sort of, because we knew the ARPA funds were in there. The other 1 million that we didn't use from free cash for ARPA funds, we will have to talk about where do we keep that for potential use as whatever ARPA was intended. There's, I believe, an intention for that too, when it was booked into health insurance. So in that sense, you're looking a little more at like 6 million. Not that that's not a small number, right? It's about a little over the 5% we said we would expect in, up to 5%, I think is our guidelines, is what we would say is good financial management. So we're not going to be looking at $10 million in transfers, is what I wanted to say. We might be looking at a little over $6 million in transfers.
Yeah, that's understood. But people are going to see the $10 million. They're
Sean.
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
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 I was just
agree.
gonna, on that theme, I think it's just important to, again, articulate that of the 10 million, 4 million is ARPA, which is not really related to the revenue budget or the operations. It was related to ARPA. And that money is theoretically earmarked for certain things. So to Mandy's point, it's really about 6 million. And then even though that 6 million, 2 million of it is interest income that, again, is unlikely to persist at that level going forward. And then, I say this, and I don't know if it's probably a little confusing, but when we look at, $4 or $5 million, it's on $100 million revenue budget and $100 million expense budget. So it really breaks down to, a 2 or 3% variance on each side. It's not $6 million on a $100 million budget. It comes from both sides of the ledger. So I know it's hard to explain when you're not kind of working with it, but I guess the question is, how precise, how, small do we want that to be?
So I'm taking notes because our report to the council can both say that we've passed these, we're recommending the guidelines, and report on what our vote is, and report on this discussion on it. So I do think the point Bob raised is we're not going to be easily able to just wave our hands about this. So I will draft a paragraph on this discussion. So right now, the guidelines suggest using a fairly high share of that for roads and sidewalks, the way we've written them now, and then putting the rest into the capital reserve. At the same time, we're recommending pulling capital reserve money over into next year's capital budget to start offsetting roads, but also if DPW gets started, the debt service that has been potentially booked for DPW. So we're talking about moving money into capital budget, but also moving it out. And I can try to write a paragraph to that extent. We've also said to the extent the region comes to us for the regional school, middle school auditorium, that this could come out of the money that we put in the capital budget, bring it back out. We didn't want to prejudge it. So I can try to write a paragraph on here are some potential uses of it. So Mandy, I'm not as comfortable with pointing out all the ARPA pieces because some of them came and went, for example, or need to be done sooner than later. At one point, there was another $1 million for the elementary school parking lot canopies on the amount the elementary school needs to offset the utility costs of canopies and solar. We have met that in the project, and there's still a lot of the parking lot that could have additional canopies, and those solar, the investment in that could feed the rest. There are still federal credits for solar panels on the books for next year. You have to have started the project next year, so that's another potential use. We never, Sean, when we did building assessments, we never did Crocker. The town did a thorough, so Crocker has been on the list for do something with its HVAC system and other pieces for a while. If the HVAC system was potentially going to be an MSBA, because they'll now do heat pumps. some of this could be Crocker money. So trying to think it through of what are the potential uses beyond just accumulating a capital reserve fund might be a way of saying there are some real uses of this, all of which are one-time funds. That was what I want to stretch. It's not moving it into an operating budget. So I don't know. I'll try to craft a paragraph and send it around to people since we don't even know what the final number is going to be, but the fact that some is going to replenish free cash reserve and that there are other pulls on it. Andy.
Yeah, another thing to consider is um, saying something about next year and what Sean has already reported about the tightness of next year's budget and a lot of the revenue that we received this year is non-recurring in that we caution against budgeting any of the excess for expenses that will become ongoing into future years because it just, in the end, is kicking a can down the road. It's not solving a problem. Not the words we'd use, but something in that effect.
Okay, that's helpful, Andy, and particularly like we didn't spend on debt service what we thought we would spend on debt service, and that's $900,000. I mean, some of these are just not. They're big numbers. So, I'll try to write a paragraph and then see if it captures some of this. Yes, it's good news, but don't immediately think therefore the operating budgets can be higher. It won't be the way I write it, but Mandy.
Yeah. So Andy makes a good point. I think if we're writing a paragraph like that, sort of, we've had some larger years of unspent revenue and excess revenue and unspent expenses based on the budget. But if you pull out these one-time that debt service wasn't used, the ARPA's there as we just saw on the year end, the expense side was extremely close to the budget, right? Within 1%. And so I think putting out the caution that says FY25, given our attempts to more closely budget and estimate, be a slightly less conservative on the revenue side of estimates and what we're seeing on the expense side, this may be the last year we see these really large year-end closeout numbers. That we might have finally figured out why they're so large, and we have these that we've been working towards it, right? They weren't as large pre-COVID, and then they got kind of large, and we might be at the end of that kind of large. And to Sean's point, they're not large percentage wise, right? They're definitely within what we would want to see, but people look at the raw number, the raw dollar amount, and say 5 million, 10 million, that's huge, right? But add to that paragraph this may be the end of this, and we're looking at Q1s and all, and given the trends that we're not going to be as flush we don't expect to be as quote flush in the year ends as these show.
Yep. So we closed out FY25. Do we want to look at the first quarter of FY26? Are we ready?
This will be quicker, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, it is the first quarter, so there's just not as much going on. On the revenue side, we've collected about 28% through the first quarter. Some of the revenues come in more heavily over the summer. For example, Cherry Hill, most of the revenue comes in July, August, September, and then we get some in May and June, but the majority comes in over the summer. Same thing with Medicaid revenues. It's sort of a couple times a year, so that one's a little lower. Miscellaneous recurring, again, we've got some of the one-time funds, and not one-time funds, but funds that are earmarked. So clearly the opioid settlements did not go directly into the revolving fund yet. So they're still in free cash, or will be in free cash, and will have to be transferred. So things like that. On the expense side, we're about 31.1% of the budget for expenditures. A lot of things get encumbered at the start of the year, software, DPW contracts for a lot of the materials it uses. So expenses are also sort of weighted toward the start of the first quarter because of encumbrances and contracts that get put into place. So if you back out the encumbrances, we're about 30.1%. So still, again, a little higher than the 25% benchmark. IT is well, I won't get into those ones. Let me see what else there is. Oh, again, actually the biggest thing on the expense side that inflates it during the first quarter is our retirement assessment. So the retirement assessment goes out completely in the first quarter, and that's $8 million or a little over $8 million. So that's the main reason why we're at 31.1%, as opposed to like 25% for the first quarter. Enterprise funds are tracking okay. We monitor usage, and especially this year, we're monitoring usage for water and sewer because we did larger rate increases this past year to fund capital and some improvements to the infrastructure. So we want to make sure that we're realizing the revenue increases that were forecasted. And so far, those are tracking pretty well. But I will say the second and third quarter reports are going to be more informative in terms of how we're doing. The big caution, the big flag I want to wave again is the collective bargaining agreements. As of the date of this report, we had 5 collective bargaining agreements that they might have been approved, but they hadn't had so they weren't reflected in these expenses yet, because if there was a retro payment, it was done after this date. Retro payment meaning if we settled on something, it would go back to July 1st in terms of the compensation. That wasn't reflected here yet. So this early report, I would caution, is on the low side because of those collective bargaining agreements not being settled. We're farther along now, so the second quarter report will, I think, get us down to just 2 that are not reflected, potentially, unless they're settled in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But there will still even be some uncertainty as of the second quarter report because of negotiations. And I think that's the main things I wanted to hit. So we just have to, again, we're going to be monitoring the budget super closely because of that, because of the collective bargaining agreements, and because we know FY25 finished so tight with spending. We're going to be monitoring them super closely, and we'll update this committee if there's any concerns in the next report. Mandy?
Hotel motel.
Yep.
You touched on it a little bit and just said they reflect the first quarter of transfers, but the hotel motel is at half of what our budget is. Do we see a seasonal change like we do with obviously Cherry Hill and pools and all with hotel motel? Do we see that the summer months are much heavier than the winter months, such
Yeah,
that 50% might even out a little bit come the Q2 reports?
Yeah, so especially the hotel motel, I think we see that going up over the summer, especially. And again, we put in there, so the way the quarters work, it actually covers June of last year in terms of how we get the distributions. So it really hammers the summer. So maybe not as much on the meals, because some of those months there would be fewer maybe college students in town that might potentially come into town to eat, but generally the summer months we see as being a little bit higher.
Okay.
Sean,
Yeah.
can I just ask a quick question? And I apologize for this being so kind of lame, but for under expenditures for assessments for OPEB, can you just kind of how does that kind of work? So these are paid at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
And
So the retirement assessment is we get a bill from the Hampshire County Retirement System, and we get a discount. You can choose to pay it monthly, but they
okay.
actually give you a discount if you pay it all. And it's it's in the tens of thousands of dollars, the discount, if
Got it.
you pay it all on July 1st.
I see.
So the
Yeah.
retirement assessment is literally money out the door that we send to the retirement system. OPEB, that's kind of our own internal transfer. So we book a journal entry that moves it from our that hits our expense account and moves it into our OPEB trust, and then eventually that money gets invested with PARAC. So
Gotcha. So that all happens in the first quarter.
yeah, most of those sort of transfer type, most of the transfers,
Yeah.
even like the interfund transfers
Mm.
for the capital improvement program, if we budget $4 million for capital projects, we do the transfer at the first quarter generally. Sometimes, I don't know if this year we were a little bit late because of the gap in staff, but generally we book those in the first quarter, and that puts the money into the capital project funds, and then departments can go ahead and actually do the projects.
Awesome.
So a lot of the transfers kind of hit all at once.
Okay, and that's mostly in the first quarter, and so we won't see these in the
Yeah, let me double check. I want to say that I feel like when we looked at this, the capital transfers might have been late though. Let me see. Where is it? Looking at the expense side and the interfund transfers, I want to say that was a little low. No, we did it. Never mind. So yeah, that was all. That was that. If it's like in the middle of page 4, interfund transfers, that full 5.4 million. That within that number is the capital improvement number, plan number that funds all the capital projects.
And
Okay, cool.
I can resend these to you if you don't know where to find them, because what you see going across is it's 100%. We've already spent the whole amount, is what he's been talking about, for the.
No, I found it on the website. This is great. I found everything. So this is, yeah, I got it. This is great. Thank you so much. Very helpful.
And snow and ice, that one we've already spent 108% because we encumber it all at the start of the year, and we're going to start tapping into that today, it looks like. So.
Right.
So yeah, again, this report's sort of the least informative because it's just so early. It's hard to make a lot of meaningful conclusions, but it's more about some of the things we know. And again, the negotiations is the big one right now.
Can I ask, Sean, Q2 ends obviously in a month. We're not through it yet, but will we see the Q2 numbers in January, or will we see them in February, do you think?
I think we'll be able to. I don't know about the timing of when the finance committee meeting will happen. It doesn't take us too long to get these reports together.
Okay.
So we could certainly get the report together by mid to late January. But the timing of when the finance committee meeting is, I'm not sure exactly if it'll fall within January, February.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah,
and then
but we
that
can get it
means-
within 30 days.
And that means then that the Q3 reports we should have before as we're reviewing the FY27 budget.
Yeah, and quarter 3 again, that's probably the most important because that's the last report we do where there's actually time to make adjustments if we do see any problems and there's anything we need to do to fix anything. It really has to be done after the Q3 report. So that one will definitely be timely.
Okay.
But I also think the timing of Q2, we've been doing a first and third Tuesday, Sean. I don't know what finance will end up wanting to do.
Yeah.
But in the guidelines, we have a touch base mid-February. So if we have Q2 before that, we'll at least know halfway through this year
How we're doing.
How we're doing and on the expense side, how tight is expense looking? And to the extent we already adjusted on some of the revenue sides where we thought Melissa did do some increases on the revenue side. How much? What does revenue look like? So that would be great timing. So that'd be good.
Absolutely.
So it's 11:23, and I'm open to any other discussion. I'm meeting with Sean on Thursday morning. So right now, trying to figure out, we tentatively have the last meeting of this year and this finance committee on December 16th. Right now, I don't have what we might discuss on it. Some of it is we could begin to be talking about capital and where the capital projects are just in terms of the expense side of some of the big things, or we could say we don't need that meeting at all. So I'm just anyone who has topics, and then when I talk with Sean, something that doesn't take the finance staff away from things they need to do to close out the year, if there is a general set of topics. Mandy.
So I think it's after the last council meeting, and I know CRC is meeting after that because we've still got continuing business to do, and so it makes sense for CRC. But I think what our transfer memo for finance is, we've covered everything, right? We don't have any outstanding referrals. So I guess I would lean towards not holding the meeting. We don't have any outstanding referrals. It sounds like I thought we might hold it if we had financial orders for the closeouts to deal with them, but it sounds like we're not going to have those either. And so, to me, it seems like we might not need it personally.
Well, that's what I was thinking, Mandy, that we didn't need it unless committee members had something they really wanted to talk about. Andy.
The only thing that I can think of, and I'm not sure that it's a strong enough reason to hold a meeting, but at least point it out, is that BCG is meeting Wednesday, and whether the committee wants to at least reserve the opportunity to hear a report on BCG and follow up on anything that they said more promptly than waiting until a new committee is formed next year.
Well, that is, I guess, a possibility. The other possibility is that although the council greeted the guidelines with very few questions, that they don't vote to approve them. They send them back, which I don't think is going to happen. So, Andy, I'm not sure starting a discussion the week after the last council meeting would be that fruitful. I think we need to start that discussion with the new council. I guess my sense, I agree with what you're saying, but really get the new council members engaged as quickly as possible, including whoever will be on the finance committee. We know at least two of you won't be on it because you are not running again. So we will get at least, there will be some reconfigurations. So I think my instinct is to not hold a meeting. And Sean is in this meeting now, and he probably would just as soon not have another meeting. But if there is anything that we really need to take up, it's tentatively in our schedule.
I guess I would say then leave it as tentative, but with the assumption that it's going to be canceled. And we'll await final word from you as to that decision, but you could hold the decision.
Thank you.
And with that said, and nearing the end of the meeting, I want to thank Sean, who's now on the phone, and others for all of your support over the years, and how much I've appreciated being a part of the Finance Committee and the financial management of the town, but looking forward to a new era and a new group taking over. So.
Well, and I want to thank the two of you, Andy, for your service before we even had a council, but then your continued service, the very beginning of the Finance Committee. None of us would have known where to find anything if you hadn't had your long-term institutional memory and guidance. It was essential for us to start and continues to have been. So I thank you so much for your service. And I'm just going to speak also, Bob. It's been fabulous to have you on, and it's a real tribute, I think, to the value of resident members. You came on first as that, the way Joe and Tom have, but that meant you could also come onto the committee, but you could accumulate knowledge while being, it's called a non-voting member, even though we always ask for votes on supports or not. So it's been a total pleasure having both of you on. Bob, I see your hand is up, and
Yeah,
Sean.
well, I wanted to say, well, first of all, thank you. And I want to say I've really enjoyed working with everyone on the committee and in previous editions of the committee, because I've been on since, I think, 2019. So It's been quite a learning experience for me, and I hope I've been able to, you know, help guide the town, help, guide the council in terms of what we need to do to keep the town financially healthy and to meet the needs of the town residents. And I know it's a trade-off and we never get it exactly right, but I think every year we get closer and closer to that ideal. But I don't know that we're ever going to reach it. It's kind of like an asymptotic curve. You're never going to quite reach the asymptote.
I love
But
that.
anyway, thank you.
Thank you both. Sean?
Yeah, I wanted to just thank Bob too. Always learn new things like that curve. Don't know what that was, that bird you named earlier, but you're always incredibly thoughtful. You ask super helpful questions for me, making sure that the work we're doing is on point. You read everything, which I've always really appreciated, whether it was reviewing their financial guidelines years ago and providing good input on that. So I really appreciate working with you. And Andy, I've had a handful of really strong mentors since I started in the town back in 2010. I can't think of anybody who's been, more impactful than you. I've really appreciated working with you on regionalization or, what else have we done? Well, we did regionalization 3 times, but financial guidelines or capital building projects or whatever it may be. Again, I can't think of anyone who's been a bigger stabilizing force to the town since I've started back in 2010. So it's going to be a big loss, and we're going to miss you. And thank you again for your service.
So we'll get to do tributes to you again at the council, but this is a tribute from a finance committee.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. That's awesome. Appreciate it. I know, Andy, I've known you longer. I've known you when I was previous in the finance committee and all the work you've done for the town. So absolute shout out to everything you've done in the engagement of the betterment of this town. So hats off to you. And Bob, thank you for your service. It's awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, on that high note, it's 11:32, and I will make a motion to adjourn unless, and by the way, I did look and we didn't have, we usually take public comments and we have, let's see whether we still have one attendee. I never opened it up, so I don't know whether I should open it up for
I think
public
you
comments.
technically have to.
Yes, I'm opening it up thank you, Mandy. I'm opening it up for public comments, which we usually do at the beginning, and I just forgot. So if the one attendee would like to make a comment, raise your hand. No. So today we have no public comments, and so I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I'll go quickly around the room. Bob?
Aye.
Kathy's a yes. Andy?
Yes.
Counselor Haneke?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
And Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Well, thank you all. And since we tentatively are not meeting on December 16th, happy holidays for any of you who aren't on the council. And I look forward to seeing you who are on the council a few more times. We are adjourned at 11:33.
Bye-bye.